Darius Johnson had driven for Lancaster Enterprises for 8 long years. In that time, he had become more than just a driver. He was the invisible thread that held the company's daily operations together. He knew the city's streets like the back of his hand, every shortcut, every detour, every quiet alley that could shave precious minutes off a trip. Executives came and went, contracts were signed and broken, and yet Darius remained constant, reliable, and invisible. He arrived at the office early, as always, parking his black sedan neatly and making sure every detail of the car was perfect. He had seen his share of chaos, executives running late, tempers flaring, VIP clients demanding impossible schedules, but he had never faltered. The company trusted him with their most sensitive clients, and he had never once failed. So when his supervisor called him into the office on that rainy Monday morning, a creeping unease settled over him. Something about the look on her face, the tight line of her lips, told him this wasn't routine. "Darius, HR wants to see you," she said, avoiding his eyes. "What is it?" he asked cautiously, gripping the strap of his bag. Her reply was short, clinical, and devastating: "You're being let go. Effective immediately." Darius froze. "What? Why? Company decision. Management policy. That's all I can tell you," she said, glancing away. 8 years of loyalty. 8 years of early mornings, late nights, meticulous attention to every detail. Gone. Just like that. No explanation, no warning. Darius left the office silently, carrying his bag and his pride, walking into the storm outside. Rain drenched him instantly, but he didn't mind. The injustice was worse than the wet clothes clinging to his back. He had never been late, never lost a package, never once given the company reason to question him. And yet, he had been discarded. Back at the office, no one realized the full consequences of the decision. The very next day, Lancaster Enterprises faced a crisis that none of the executives had anticipated. The CEO, Richard Lancaster, had an investor meeting scheduled in less than 24 hours, a deal that could secure millions in funding and ensure the company's future. And the critical documents needed for the presentation were stored at a warehouse across the city. The twist? The routes to the warehouse were tricky, fraught with traffic snarls, construction, and timing-sensitive delivery windows. No GPS system could predict the subtle nuances of city traffic, the shortcuts, or the quiet backstreets. And the one person who knew all these details? Darius Johnson, the man who had just been fired. Meanwhile, inside Lancaster Enterprises, executives were oblivious to the ticking clock. They scrambled to find alternative drivers, but no one could navigate the city like Darius. Calls were made, schedules shifted, and temp drivers panicked as the storm outside worsened. Darius, walking home through the rain, felt a strange clarity amidst the injustice. He thought of the city streets, the warehouse, the documents, the investors. He knew the company didn't understand the value he brought. But he also knew something else: the company needed him. And if they didn't call him, the deal and possibly careers would collapse. By evening, the storm had intensified, and Darius sat quietly in his small apartment. The phone rang. His heart skipped a beat. It was Lancaster Enterprises. "Darius, we need your help," the voice on the other end said, desperate. He leaned back in his chair, calm but resolute. He had been dismissed, disrespected, overlooked, but he wasn't powerless. He knew the city, he knew the timing, and he knew exactly how to save the company. "All right," he said finally, his voice measured. "I'll do it. But on one condition: respect. No excuses, no belittling, no nonsense. I'll get you there, but I won't tolerate being treated as if my knowledge doesn't matter." Silence on the line. Then a hurried, almost desperate agreement. "Agreed. Just get us the documents. We have no other choice." As he hung up, Darius felt a rush of anticipation. The city lay before him, slick and dark, every street a potential obstacle. But he was ready. He had been underestimated for too long, and now he would show exactly why the company had needed him all along. He packed his bag, checked his car, and stepped out into the pouring rain, knowing that in less than 24 hours, the fate of Lancaster Enterprises would rest entirely on his shoulders and his knowledge of streets, shortcuts, and timing. For the executives, firing Darius was meant to be inconsequential. For him, it was fuel. And for the company, it would soon prove to be a lesson in the cost of underestimating the people who actually make the world turn. The next morning, Lancaster Enterprises was in chaos. The storm had worsened, and with it, the city streets had become a maze of flooded avenues, blocked intersections, and snarling traffic. Executives scurried between floors, shouting into phones, trying every available driver to retrieve the critical documents needed for the investor meeting. But every attempt failed. "Where is the warehouse?" one assistant asked, exasperated. "GPS says the routes are jammed, construction is everywhere, and temp drivers are panicking." "No one else can navigate this," muttered another. "The documents won't arrive on time. We're going to lose the deal." The boardroom was tense. Richard Lancaster, CEO, ran his hands through his hair in frustration. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside. Every passing minute without the documents was a ticking countdown to disaster. Suddenly, someone spoke. "Has anyone called Darius Johnson?" Silence fell. A few heads turned. He's been fired," whispered one executive, as if speaking it aloud made it real. "Why would we call him?" Richard Lancaster's eyes narrowed. He slammed his hand onto the desk. "Do it," he barked. "He's the only one who knows how to get there on time. I don't care if he's no longer on the payroll, call him." The assistant swallowed hard, her hand trembling as she dialed his number. After a few rings, Darius picked up. His calm, steady voice carried over the line. "Darius, it's Lancaster Enterprises," the assistant said, voice tight. "We need you, urgently. The investor meeting, the warehouse, you're the only one who can deliver." There was a pause on the other end. Darius didn't react emotionally. He had anticipated this moment. "I'll help," he said finally. "But on one condition. Treat me with respect. No excuses, no condescension. You called me because you need the right person for the job. That's how this works." The assistant relayed his words to the CEO. Richard Lancaster's jaw tightened. Pride warred with desperation. But the deal mattered more than ego. "Agreed," he said firmly. "Do what you need to do." Darius hung up, grabbed his bag, and approached his car. Rain had soaked the streets, turning puddles into miniature lakes and making visibility a challenge. But he was ready. Years of driving for Lancaster Enterprises had trained him for moments exactly like this. Back at the office, the executives tried to plan contingencies, but Darius's calm presence over the phone had already reassured them. He was a silent authority, the storm outside couldn't shake his confidence. Sliding into his black sedan, Darius mapped out the route in his head. GPS was useless in this scenario. The app didn't account for flooded streets, detours, or the back alleys he knew by heart. Every decision would be critical. Meanwhile, the clock ticked relentlessly toward the investor meeting. Every failed attempt by temp drivers had only deepened the panic. Without Darius, the company would collapse. The storm had revealed a painful truth: sometimes, the people you overlook are the ones who hold everything together. Darius navigated the streets with precision, weaving through traffic, slipping into back roads, and avoiding flooded intersections. Every turn, every shortcut, every cautious acceleration was executed with years of experience. At one point, a large delivery truck blocked the usual route. Temp drivers would have panicked, waiting for hours. Darius didn't hesitate. He turned sharply into a narrow alleyway, barely wide enough for his car. Mud splashed against the tires, rain hit the windshield like bullets, but he moved steadily forward. Inside Lancaster Enterprises, executives tracked his progress anxiously. The assistant on the line provided updates: he's through 5th and Oak, he's avoiding the flood near Main, he'll reach the warehouse in 10 minutes if he keeps this pace. As promised, Darius arrived at the warehouse just in time. He handed the documents over to the awaiting staff, his expression calm, almost casual, despite the storm outside. "Here you go," he said. "All in order?" The assistant gasped. You made it? On time?" Darius shrugged, wiping rain from his brow. "I told you. You needed the right person for the job. You got me." With the documents in hand, Lancaster Enterprises began preparing for the investor meeting. Charts were projected, figures checked, and presentations rebuilt. Thanks to Darius, the company was back on track, ready to impress the investors, and potentially secure millions in funding. In the office, Richard Lancaster sat back, realizing the magnitude of what had just happened. He had dismissed Darius without thought, only to find that the man's knowledge, loyalty, and calm in crisis had literally saved the company. The storm outside subsided, but inside Lancaster Enterprises, a storm of understanding had begun. Never underestimate the people who quietly hold everything together. And Darius Johnson, the driver they had fired, had just proven that true competence and courage cannot be ignored even when titles or status suggest otherwise. The streets were a chaotic blur of rain, traffic, and flashing lights. Darius Johnson gripped the steering wheel of his black sedan with calm precision. Every wet street, every detour, every tight alley had been memorized over years of driving for Lancaster Enterprises. This was more than just a delivery. This was the survival of a deal worth millions, and the company's future rested entirely on him. Behind him, the city roared with thunder and honking horns, temp drivers struggling hopelessly with blocked roads and flooded intersections. But Darius moved like a conductor orchestrating the perfect symphony. Every turn, every acceleration, every brake was calculated. One wrong move could ruin everything, but he didn't falter. Inside the office, executives stared at maps and GPS screens, growing more frantic by the minute. Their temp drivers were stuck, their plans unraveling. The clock ticked mercilessly toward the investor meeting. Panic was visible on every face. "Is he going to make it?" whispered one assistant. "He has to," another replied. "He knows these streets better than anyone. If anyone can do this, it's him." Meanwhile, Darius navigated a flooded intersection with surgical precision, sliding into a narrow alley that no GPS could detect. The rain poured over the hood of his car, and the wipers struggled to keep up. Mud and debris splashed, but Darius remained steady, eyes sharp, hands firm. He didn't need directions, he didn't need validation. He just needed focus. At one point, a massive delivery truck blocked the main route, its horn blaring and engine idling. Any inexperienced driver would have panicked, wasting precious minutes searching for alternatives. Not Darius. He turned confidently into a narrow side street, barely wide enough for his car. He inched forward, tires skimming the curb, avoiding trash cans and puddles, before seamlessly rejoining the main road. Back at Lancaster Enterprises, tension was at its peak. Richard Lancaster, pacing the floor, could barely believe the scene. "We fired him," he muttered under his breath. "We actually fired the only person who could save us." The assistant hesitated before picking up the phone again. "He's almost at the warehouse, sir. Estimated arrival, 5 minutes. 5 minutes. The company's entire future hung in those few minutes. Darius arrived at the warehouse, wet, tired, but composed. He stepped out of the car, shook off the rain, and handed the carefully packed documents to the waiting assistant. Every signature, every chart, every folder was intact. You made it," she gasped, awe evident in her voice. Darius gave a small nod. "I told you. You just needed the right person for the job." The assistant quickly loaded the documents into a secure courier van to transport to the investor meeting. Meanwhile, Darius climbed back into his car, taking the long route back to Lancaster Enterprises, knowing that his role wasn't over until the papers were safely in the boardroom. The investors arrived on time. The CEO presented with confidence, the documents intact, graphs precise, and the deal progressing without a hitch. Lancaster Enterprises' reputation remained unscathed, the funding secured. Inside the office, Richard Lancaster finally allowed himself to breathe. He had underestimated Darius, dismissed him without thought, and nearly jeopardized the company's future. But the man they fired had just proven his worth in the most dramatic way possible. Later, as Darius returned to the office, executives gathered around, whispering and murmuring, their previous skepticism replaced with admiration. Even those who had demanded his firing looked embarrassed, realizing they had misjudged the man. Richard Lancaster approached Darius, his face a mix of respect and humility. "You know," he said quietly, "you just saved this company. And probably every one of us in this room." Darius smiled faintly. "I just did what I knew needed to be done, sir." "No," Lancaster said firmly. "You did what we couldn't. And you did it with skill, patience, and calm under pressure. You proved something today: titles don't make the person capable. Knowledge, loyalty, and courage do." The storm outside had subsided, but inside Lancaster Enterprises, a new understanding had taken hold. The company learned a lesson it wouldn't forget: the people who quietly hold everything together are often the ones who matter most. Darius walked through the office, soaked but triumphant. He hadn't asked for recognition or praise, but he had earned both. The driver they had dismissed was now the man who had saved the company, and everyone from interns to executives knew it. By the end of the day, Lancaster Enterprises had secured the deal, avoided disaster, and learned a valuable lesson about humility, foresight, and respect. And Darius Johnson, the man they had fired, had become the hero no one had expected. The storm had passed, leaving glistening streets and a calm city skyline. Inside Lancaster Enterprises, the tension of the past 24 hours had been replaced by quiet anticipation. Executives whispered to each other, still in awe of what had just happened. Darius Johnson, the man they had fired, had saved the company's most important deal. And now, the moment of reckoning had arrived. Richard Lancaster called an emergency meeting. Employees gathered in the boardroom, curiosity and tension mixing in the air. Rumors had spread about Darius's role in the rescue of the documents, but no one knew what would happen next. "Everyone, listen up," Lancaster began, his voice firm yet calm. "Yesterday, we made a mistake. We dismissed an employee who has been nothing but loyal, skilled, and dedicated for 8 years. Darius Johnson, the driver we fired, is the reason Lancaster Enterprises is not facing disaster right now." Murmurs rippled through the room. Some employees exchanged embarrassed glances, realizing they had underestimated him. Darius, standing quietly near the back, remained composed. Lancaster continued, "Darius has proven that competence, knowledge, and dedication are worth more than titles or seniority. He has saved this company, and I want to make this right." A stunned silence followed. Then Lancaster's voice grew even more decisive. "Effective immediately, Darius Johnson is rehired, permanently. Not just that, he is promoted to logistics and operations manager. He will oversee the planning and execution of critical deliveries and operations, mentor our teams, and ensure that no one underestimates the importance of diligence and expertise again." Gasps filled the room. Colleagues who had doubted him stared in amazement. Executives who had argued for his dismissal hung their heads in quiet shame. Darius's eyes widened in disbelief. This was more than a job, this was recognition, respect, and validation for years of service he had quietly given. I don't know what to say, Darius said finally, his voice calm but touched with emotion. You don't need to say anything, Lancaster replied, smiling. Your actions spoke louder than any words. You taught all of us a lesson we won't forget: never underestimate the people who truly keep a company running. The room erupted in applause. Employees approached Darius, shaking his hand, patting his shoulder, some even asking for advice. For once, he was no longer invisible. The quiet, reliable man who had been overlooked for years was now the center of admiration and respect. Later, Lancaster pulled Darius aside. You know, I've built empires, signed billion-dollar deals, and thought I understood leadership. But yesterday, I learned more from you than I ever learned in business school. Darius shook his head. I just did what I had to do. I knew the right thing to do, and I did it. That's all. No, Lancaster said firmly. You did more than that. You saved lives, careers, and the future of this company. You reminded all of us that skill and loyalty are more valuable than status or hierarchy. Today, you are not just a driver. You are a hero. And from now on, the world will see it too. For Darius, the reward was not just the promotion or the salary, though both were generous. It was the acknowledgement that his years of quiet dedication mattered. The validation that he had been right all along, that his knowledge and loyalty were invaluable, and that one person, even when overlooked, could change the fate of an entire company. He returned to his office later, reflecting on what had happened. The storm had tested everyone, but it had revealed the truth: the people who are underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed often carry the power to save the day. And in Darius's case, that truth had been undeniable. From that day forward, Darius Johnson was no longer just a driver. He was a symbol of competence, integrity, and the quiet power of doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. Executives, interns, and colleagues alike learned to respect his insight and skill. As he walked through the now calm streets outside the building, Darius thought about the past 24 hours. Fired one day, a hero the next. Underestimated, yet indispensable. He smiled faintly, realizing something profound: sometimes, the people who seem ordinary are the ones who change everything. And for Lancaster Enterprises, the lesson was clear: never underestimate the person who knows the work, the city, and the stakes better than anyone else. They may be the only one who can save the day. Darius had been fired. He had returned. He had saved the company. And in doing so, he had shown the world that true value cannot be measured by title, position, or status. It is measured by skill, courage, and unwavering dedication.